This video is on the YouTube channel of the Miami Valley Fair Housing Center. My name is John Zimmerman, and I am the Vice President. Welcome to this segment of a recorded live class on the 2022 Reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act. Section 2. This, to me, is the heart of the Reauthorization Act. And so we're going to talk about the forms that I sent all of you. And this is a place that if you want to go and get them off of the internet or direct somebody else to, you can go to this HUD resource page. And the page is a toolkit for the forms everyone needs to be compliant with VIWA. And so I'm hoping that I'm going to escape from here for a quick second, and I'm going to bring this form up. This is the first form that everyone is required to give. And as you go down this form, yeah, let's see if I can down, starting right here. This, if I were going to be working with a tenant, I would highlight this and I would read this to them verbatim. This notice explains your rights under VIWA. A HUD-approved certification form is attached to this notice. You can fill out this form to show that you are or have been a victim of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking, and that you wish to use your rights under VIWA. And so this is Form 5380. And when you see this, so the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development is the federal agency that oversees, and right here, so if you're a Section 8 landlord, you would say the Metro Housing Section 8 program, or if it was in Montgomery County, it would be the GDPM Section 8 program. Okay. However, if you're a Section 8 landlord, up here, this is where you would put your name. And when you hand these out to Section 8 landlords, they have lots of footnotes, okay, that people can read on these forms. And so there's lots of them here. This notice uses HP for housing provider, but the housing provider should insert its name where HP is used. And so there's lots of little hints, so that you can do, work with people to do this. So that if you're in rapid rehousing, you should be sitting down with each of your landlords and saying, okay, this is where you put our name, this is where you put your name, okay? And you do that not only on this form, but you do it on the emergency transfer plan that you don't have to give a tenant, but that you have to have on file and ready for inspection by anybody. HUD might call you up and say, I want to see your emergency transfer plan. So you have to have it available. And it's suggested that people put it on their websites. And so, especially like public housing agencies should certainly have that on their website for people to see and access in the event that they don't have it, but they need it. So that is 5380. I'm going to talk about 5380. So this notice explains the VIWA protections, and it should be delivered to the resident at the time the applicant is denied assistance or is provided assistance or admission under a covered housing program. It has to be given at the time the individual is then leased up. And it has to be given with, look at the bottom, any notification of eviction or notification of termination of assistance, and it should be available in multiple languages. And so this form, that if you, for example, give someone, they have a violation of making noise and disturbing the quiet enjoyment. And it's happened 2 or 3 times, and you need to give them a 10-day notice or 20-day notice or 30-day notice, whatever you do to cure, okay, that problem of noise. that you must give that to them. And it doesn't matter how many times you have to give them. So they did it in June, and it's quiets down. It happens in August. It happens in September. It happens in October. Each time you do an adverse action, you give them what I call a VIWA packet. Okay. And the VIWA packet must have this in it. Okay. Plus, it must have this. HUD 5382, certification of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking. And this is a form approved by HUD for those seeking VIWA protection. It is to be completed by the victim to document an incident of domestic violence. And it is an optional form that a victim or their advocate may use in response to a written request by a housing provider. Now, on the notice, the 5380, it explains to everyone that if you ask your landlord for VIWA protections, okay, they may or may not use this form, okay, but you can elect to use it. So they may, what they may or may not do is say, give me that in writing. So you could get a request from verbally from someone, and you might say, "Great, let's you can use the 5382 to report it." Okay, or you can get a form from your attorney or somebody else. Okay, but you can do it in writing. You have to give them 14 days to do that. Okay, so this form you'll see on the back is the date the written request is received, name of the victim, all those logistics. So this is not a form that you add your name to or anything like this. This is merely a HUD form that you give them, unlike the notice of occupancy rights or the model emergency transfer where you have to have your names in them. Okay, so this is a really, really great form. In lieu of this, there are several types of third-party forms that are allowable. And so you can have a document signed by the victim, by a person with a victim service provider, an attorney, or a medical professional or other qualified professional, all who must sign the document, quote, under penalty of perjury, that the professional, quote, believes the incident of domestic violence, stalking, dating violence, or sexual assault meets the definitions found in the HUD regulations. So that if you ever wanted to share this PowerPoint with any providers or anything, please do. It'll give them access to look at the regulations, and then we have some of them right here. And then these are right here are all hyperlinks to these forms. So if one uses the optional form, here's the recap. It states that the applicant or tenant is a victim of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking, states that this meets the definition and includes the name of the individual who committed the domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking, if the name is known and if it's safe to provide. Okay. So those are the two that you absolutely must give every applicant, everybody who leases up, everybody when they recertify after a year, and every adverse action up to and including eviction. So the important, and that's why I have these two. So we skip. So it's 5380, you skip, but 53. Oh, and again, here's this where it has to be delivered to the residents, and this is right out of the regulations. So it's the same as the 5380. Now, the emergency transfer request for certain victims of VIWA, this form says, quote, if you are seeking an emergency transfer, you may use this form. Note, the covered housing provider may, at its discretion, ask an individual seeking an emergency transfer to document the occurrence. So if we want a landlord to know that the door that was broken down is not our fault, we use the first form, okay? And then the police have to get involved and go after the perpetrator. But if that door getting broken down leads to a person being so afraid that they need to move and do safety planning, then the housing provider may, at its discretion, ask you to document this. And if the individual has not already provided documentation of that occurrence. We believe on the very bottom that it is the best practice to deliver this to the resident with the other two forms. So why does HUD want this delivered and redelivered and redelivered? And you're thinking, boy, we're going to use trees to print all of these out. And it happens that many victims of violence, uh, dating, domestic, sexual assault, stalking, will not speak up until after they see these forms 1, 2, 10, 15 times. And when we have noise complaints, we never know what that noise is all about unless somebody's telling us. If we don't get information that, oh, there's somebody beating somebody up, we don't know, and we can't, make unwarranted assumptions. Okay. So once, they get this time and again, they are more apt to eventually know that we're here, we keep on giving you this information, and we're a safe person to come to and talk to about it. And that's what we have to do, is to build trust, because many victims of domestic violence have really lost a lot of trust in the entire world. So and so I'm not going to bring that form up, but we do have the model emergency transfer plan. And this is something that each covered housing provider shall adopt with these definitions in mind. You have to have an internal emergency transfer where the tenant would not be categorized as a new applicant, and there is no new application process. So if, for example, we're a public housing authority and it's a public housing tenant that's going to move from one of our properties to another of our properties, there's no new application process. However, if they're porting out from one county to another, and here at the Fair Housing Center, we have given people guidance on that and worked with Greater Dayton Premier Management to make that happen, is to go to another county. There's not a new application process. If it's a Section 8 voucher, you just port. If it is a new public housing thing, that's a whole nother matter. So external emergency transfer, the tenant would be categorized as a new applicant. And so, and then a safe unit refers to a unit that the victim survivor believes is safe. And so sometimes we might show someone another unit that's 1 mile away, and they'll say, nah, I really need to be 5 miles away. This person has a way of finding me, and that's just too close. It's really the same neighborhood. So we have to rely on those folks to tell us, what is safe for them. And I do want to bring up something here, that if you're working with Section 8 landlords and rapid rehousing landlords and any continuum of care program landlord, this model emergency transfer plan is really important for them to get this on file. And so when you're using the form, of course, you put the name of the housing provider up at the top, and you put it there again. And then on this next page right here is that it goes from one page to the next. It starts up here where it says, this plan is based on a model emergency transfer plan published by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, the federal agency that oversees that, or you say oversees rapid rehousing in Miami County, or whatever the name. And so and there might be a few other places, but be sure and make sure that your landlords have this on file, especially continuum of care, because those COC regs require it. And I have some slides on that a little bit later. So I wanted to make sure that everyone saw, this form, and and then the last form, of course, that I sent you a housing provider's obligations under VIO. It's a big long thing. I'm not going to go through that, but we do we do have the lease addendum. And a lot of you I know are getting lease addendums. But one of the things, let me grab my lease addendum here, is that when this is done at the signing of a lease between a Section 8 landlord and the Public Housing Authority, this needs to be read to the tenant. So, what has to be read is the purpose of the addendum, um, conflicts with other provisions of the lease, terms of the lease, that you have to have that in there, and then what the VIRA protections are. And it says right here, the landlord may request in writing that the victim, um, uh, you know, uh, put in writing that they're requesting to uh, use their VIRA rights, and that the documentation as noted on the certification form must be completed and submitted within 14 business days or an agreed upon extension date to receive protection under VIRA. Those who provide the certification or other supporting documentation within the specified time frame may result in eviction. And I'm stunned that HUD still has that on this form, but they do. And so that we, once this has been read to someone, you need to get them to sign off. Yes, we have received this and we understand it. So those are the forms.